The hydroponics bay of research station echo hummed with artificial life. Long after the day shift ended, Vexara preferred it this way, alone with the struggling seedlings and the gentle whoosh of recycled air in the dim emergency lighting. Her pale purple skin looked almost human, the chemical burns that mapped her face and arms fading into shadow. She moved between the growing beds with practiced silence, her red curls tucked beneath a worn hood. The plants here were dying. Most had been dead when she arrived 6 months ago, casualties of the toxic storms that had ravaged Kepler 440b. But some still fought, sending out desperate green shoots toward the artificial suns. Those were the ones that understood her. Vexara's scarred fingers traced the edge of a withering tomato plant, back on Sarati. Before the war, her touch could coax flowers from barren rock. Now her hands shook with permanent nerve damage, her voice a gravelly whisper when she spoke at all, which was rarely. The soft thud of boots on metal made her freeze. Someone was coming down the corridor, unusual for this time of night. She pulled her hood lower and shrank into the shadows between the growing towers, wings pressed tight against her back beneath the tattered cloth that concealed them. Dr. Kai Thorne entered the bay carrying a small case of supplies. The human botanist moved with quiet efficiency, apparently unaware of her presence. Vexara had seen him during shift changes, noticed how he handled the damaged plants with the same gentleness others reserved for newborns. He never stared at her scars, never whispered behind his hand like the other colonists. She watched him kneel beside a patch of scorched earth where nothing had grown in years. From his case, he withdrew what looked like ordinary soil, but she could smell the complex mixture of nutrients and synthetic compounds, hope bottled in dirt. "You can come out," he said without looking up. "I know you're there." Vexara's breath caught. She considered fleeing, but something in his tone, matter of fact, without judgment, kept her rooted. After a long moment, she stepped into the light. Kai glanced up briefly, taking in her hooded form, then returned to his work. "Night shift." "Yes." Her voice came out rougher than intended, damaged vocal cords making even simple words difficult. "Good. The plants grow better without all the day shift chatter." He sprinkled seeds into the prepared soil with infinite care. They need quiet to remember how to live. For 20 minutes, they worked in comfortable silence. Vexara tended her usual rounds while Kai prepared 3 more seed beds. She found herself stealing glances at his hands, steady, gentle, coaxing life from death. When was the last time she'd seen such tenderness? A memory surfaced unbidden. Her own hands, unmarked by burns, weaving flowering vines into her sister's hair. The wedding that never happened, the city that never saw another dawn. She pushed the memory away, but not before a small sound escaped her throat, part sob, part sigh. Kai looked up then, really looked at her. His brown eyes were patient, kind, not the quick, uncomfortable glances she'd grown used to, but genuine attention. "The burns," she found herself saying, then stopped. Why was she speaking? She never spoke about this. "Chemical weapons," Kai said quietly. It wasn't a question. Vexara nodded, pulling her hood lower. "The Confederation thought poison would be more efficient than bombs, less damage to infrastructure. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but weighted with real understanding. "You survived, though. That takes incredible strength." Strength. When was the last time someone had called her strong instead of broken? The others, the humans, the other survivors, they look at me and see only what I've lost. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "As if my scars are all that remain of me." Kai was quiet for a long moment, his hands still working the soil. Finally, he looked up again, meeting her eyes directly. "You know what I see when I look at you?" Vexara shook her head, afraid to breathe. "I see someone who refuses to let the world stay dead. You're here every night, nurturing things back to life. That's not survival, that's rebellion against despair." Something cracked open in her chest, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "You do not flinch from me," she whispered. "Why?" Kai's hands stilled in the soil as he considered her question. The hydroponics bay's gentle hum filled the silence between them, and Vexara felt exposed under his thoughtful gaze. "Why would I flinch from beauty struggling to grow again?" he said finally, his voice soft but certain. Vexara's laugh was bitter, harsh against her damaged throat. Beauty, she pushed back her hood, revealing the full extent of her scars. Purple skin mottled with white patches where the chemicals had eaten away at her, red curls brittle and sparse in places. I was beautiful once, before the war, before the poison ate through my world and everything in it. She turned away, but Kai's voice stopped her. Tell me about before. No one had ever asked. For a moment, she couldn't speak, overwhelmed by memories that still cut like glass. Sarati was alive. Our cities grew from living trees. Our gardens sang with the voices of flowers. I was a bloom singer. I could coax any plant to flourish with just my touch, my voice. Her fingers traced the scarred skin of her throat. The Confederation's weapons didn't just kill our bodies. They killed our gifts. But not all of them, Kai said quietly. I've watched you work. The plants respond to you differently than they do to anyone else. Before she could protest, he stood and moved to his supply case. Close your eyes. What? Trust me. Please. Something in his tone made her comply. She heard him moving, the soft rustle of packages, the gentle scrape of a tool against soil. Then his voice, closer now. Open them. In his cupped palms sat a small plant unlike anything she'd seen, delicate silver leaves that seemed to shimmer with their own light. A single bud at its crown glowing soft blue in the dim lighting. It's a hybrid, Kai explained. Part earth jasmine, part something I found in the ruins of your city. I've been working on it for months, but it wouldn't bloom until yesterday. Yesterday, she whispered. The day after we first spoke. It opened when I told it about you. Vexara stared at the impossible flower, her eyes filling with tears she thought had dried up years ago. That's not possible, isn't it? You've been caring for these plants every night for months, talking to them, even if you won't. Talk to people. They know your voice, your touch. This little one has been listening. He held the plant closer to her. Would you like to hold it? Her scarred hands trembled as she accepted the precious gift. The moment her fingers touched the stem, the bud pulsed with brighter light and slowly, impossibly, began to unfurl. Petals of silver and blue opened like a star, releasing a fragrance that smelled like home-like Sarati gardens and morning rain. And everything she'd lost, the tears came then. Not the bitter tears of grief she'd shed in the ruins of her world, but something warmer, something that tasted like hope. How she managed. Life finds a way, Kai said, his own voice thick with emotion, even after the worst destruction. Even when we think everything beautiful is gone, life finds a way to bloom again. She looked up at him through her tears, seeing the gentleness in his brown eyes, the way he looked at her not with pity but with wonder. You made this for me. I cultivated it, but you made it bloom. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek where a tear tracked through the scarred skin. You're still a bloom singer, Vexara. The poison changed your song, but it didn't silence it. Standing there in the artificial light, holding impossible beauty in her damaged hands, Vexara felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing that would take time, but the first tentative unfurling of possibility. Thank you, she whispered. Kai smiled, and for the first time in years, she smiled back. The next morning, she found a small pot waiting outside her quarters, with a note in careful human script, for the most beautiful gardener. On Kepler 4 for to be. K inside was a cutting from their shared creation, already sending out new silver shoots. That night, she didn't hide in the shadows when he came to work. 3 weeks after the first bloom, Vexara found herself looking forward to the night shift in ways that had nothing to do with solitude. Kai had begun staying later, bringing tea in a thermal flask that they shared while working among the slowly recovering plants. Their conversations meandered from botany to poetry, from the science of soil composition to the philosophy of second chances. Tonight felt different. The air in the hydroponics bay seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. You're favoring your left arm again, Kai observed, watching her reach awkwardly for a high-watering nozzle. Vexara pulled back quickly. It's nothing. Chemical burns don't heal properly without treatment. The scar tissue contracts, limits movement. His voice held professional concern, but underneath it was something warmer. I've been developing some topical treatments from plant compounds. They might help. She wanted to refuse, had reflexively refused all offers of help for so long it was instinct. But something about the way he asked, without pity or intrusion, made her reconsider. You would want to touch me, like that? The question revealed more vulnerability than she'd intended. Kai set down his tools and moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a wounded bird. Vexara, you're not repulsive. You're not something to be endured or fixed out of charity. He paused, searching for words. You're extraordinary. Her laugh caught in her throat. I'm covered in scars. So, is this place? He gestured around the bay, where new growth pushed through scorched earth and broken stems reached toward artificial suns. Scars mean survival. They mean you fought and won. She studied his face, looking for deception or pity, finding only steady warmth. Finally, she nodded. Kai's healing salves smelled of the hybrid flowers they'd been cultivating, silver jasmine, and something uniquely Serati. His hands were gentle as he worked the medicine into the tight scar tissue of her arms. Professional, at first, then increasingly tender as she relaxed under his touch. The skin is softer than I expected, he murmured, his fingers tracing the edge where purple skin met white scar tissue. Serati skin is different from human, more sensitive. The word came out breathier than she'd intended. His hands stilled. Should I stop? No. The answer surprised them both with its immediacy. Please. It's been so long since anyone touched me without fear. Something shifted in the space between them. The clinical touch became a caress, his palms spreading, warmth across her shoulders as he worked the salve into old wounds. When he reached the base of her neck, she made a soft sound that had nothing to do with pain. Vexara. Her name on his lips was a question and a prayer. She turned in his arms, letting him see the want in her eyes. The cloth she always wore to hide her wings had loosened, and she felt the familiar weight of concealment. But not tonight. Not with him. Slowly, deliberately, she let the fabric fall away. Kai's breath caught as her wings unfurled, not the proud, iridescent plumage they'd once been, but patched with scars, some feathers missing entirely. Still beautiful in their resilience, still uniquely, powerfully her. My God, he whispered. You're magnificent. The kiss that followed was soft at first, tentative, full of wonder. But as her wings wrapped around them both, creating an intimate cocoon in the middle of the growing bay, it deepened into something that spoke of longing held too long in check. His hands mapped the landscape of her scars with reverent attention, each touch saying what words couldn't, that she was desired, treasured, seen in all her complexity. When she pulled back to look at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I forgot, she whispered. I forgot I could feel like this. So did I, he admitted, his forehead resting against hers. I came here to bury myself in work, to forget. But you make me want to remember what it feels like to be alive. They made love among the growing plants, surrounded by the miracles they'd coaxed from dead soil. Her wings created a canopy above them as they moved together, to broken things finding wholeness in each other's arms. When she cried out in pleasure, her voice carried echoes of the song she thought she'd lost, not the pure notes of before, but something richer, deeper, earned through pain and found again through love. Afterward, they lay entwined on the soft, growing medium, her head on his chest, his fingers threading through her curls. The hybrid flowers around them glowed brighter, as if responding to their joy. What happens now? She asked, suddenly uncertain. Kai's arms tightened around her. Now, we grow something beautiful together. The morning brought harsh reality with the shift change. Vexara had meant to leave before the day crew arrived, but she'd fallen asleep in Kai's arms among the growing beds. The shocked faces of Dr. Helena Voss and her research team said everything about how their relationship would be received. I didn't realize the botanical department had expanded into xenobiology, Dr. Voss said with acid sweetness, her gaze raking over Vexara's hastily rewrapped wings. Kai stood slowly, placing himself between Vexara and the other humans. Dr. Voss, we were working late on the hybrid cultivation project. Is that what they're calling it now? Another researcher snickered, earning sharp looks from his colleagues. Vexara felt the familiar shame crawling up her spine, the urge to flee and hide warring with something new, the memory of how Kai saw her. the worth she'd glimpsed in his eyes. She stood straighter, meeting Dr. Voss's disapproving stare. "I should go," she said quietly. "Yes." Dr. Voss agreed. "You should." The dismissal hit like a physical blow. Vexara gathered her tools with hands that trembled slightly, hyper-aware of the whispered conversation starting up around the bay. As she moved toward the exit, she caught fragments, unnatural, desperate. What was he thinking? But Kai's voice cut through the murmurs. "Vexara, wait." She paused at the threshold, not turning around. "My quarters, 8 tonight. Please." The simple words carried weight, a choice, a declaration, a commitment made publicly. Dr. Voss's sharp intake of breath confirmed that everyone understood the implications. Vexara nodded once and left. The storm hit 3 days later. Just as the gossip about their relationship reached its peak, Vexara had endured the stares and whispers, the carefully constructed distance the other colonists now maintained. Even worse were the looks of pity from the few remaining Sarati refugees, their faces saying what their words didn't, that she was debasing herself, clinging to a human because no one of her own kind would have her. But the storm changed everything. The meteorological alarms shrieked through station echo as winds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour slammed into the habitat. Domes, the main power grid, failed first, then backup systems began cascading into darkness. In the chaos, a section of the outer hull buckled, and emergency protocols sealed off the damaged area, trapping Dr. Voss and 2 junior researchers in a rapidly depressurizing compartment. "The maintenance shafts are too narrow for rescue bots," Chief Engineer Torres reported grimly, "and the external hull breach is 12 meters up. No way to reach it with our equipment. Someone small enough to fit through the shafts." Another voice suggested, "Someone who could fly." All eyes turned to Vexara, who had been helping coordinate evacuations from the flooding lower levels. She felt the weight of their stares, no longer dismissive, but calculating, desperate. "The atmospheric pressure differential will be extreme," Torres continued, "and the toxic particulates in the storm could cause permanent damage to respiratory systems. It's essentially a suicide mission." "I'll do it," Vexara said quietly. "Vexara, no." Kai's voice was sharp with fear. "You don't owe them anything." She looked at him, seeing the terror in his eyes, the love that made her precious to at least one person in the universe. "I don't do this for them. I do it because it's right." The journey through the maintenance shafts was a nightmare of cramped passages and failing life support. But when Vexara emerged into the damaged compartment, her wings spreading despite the screaming wind through the hull breach, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The fierce joy of flight, even in the face of death. Getting Dr. Voss and her team back through the shafts required 3 separate trips, each more dangerous as the storm intensified. By the time she brought out the last researcher, Vexara's lungs were burning from the toxic air, her feathers singed from electrical discharges, but she was alive. More than alive, she was victorious. The aftermath was a revelation. Dr. Voss, pale and shaken, approached her in the medical bay where Kai was treating her respiratory burns. "I owe you my life," the older woman said stiffly. I misjudged you. Badly." "Yes." Vexara agreed, her voice even rougher than usual. "You did." The honesty seemed to surprise Dr. Voss. She nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think Dr. Thorne is a lucky man." When they were alone again, Kai gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of her injuries. "You terrified me," he murmured against her hair. "But I came back," she pointed out. "I had something to come back to." That night, as she lay recovering, in his quarters, the storm raging uselessly against reinforced walls, Vexara realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. She was no longer hiding in shadows, no longer apologizing for taking up space in the world. She was Vexara of the Sarati. She was a bloom singer. She was beloved, and she was done being ashamed. 6 months later, Station Echo was unrecognizable. Where once there had been barren soil and dying plants, now gardens flourished in impossible abundance. The hybrid flowers that Vexara and Kai had created together grew in cascading terraces throughout the habitat, their silver and blue blossoms providing both beauty and practical benefits. Natural air, purification, soil enrichment, and a renewable source of medicines. Vexara stood in what had once been the sterile central plaza, now transformed into a living amphitheater where different species gathered each evening to share food and stories. Her wings were uncovered, catching the light of the setting sun. Through the transparent dome above, the scars remained, would always remain. But they no longer defined her. Nervous? Kai asked, approaching with 2 cups of the floral tea that had become their evening ritual. Terrified, she admitted, accepting the warm cup. Serati bonding ceremonies are intense. Are you certain your people will understand? Our people. He corrected gently, and yes, I think they will. Dr. Voss has been telling everyone about your rescue flight for months. You're something of a legend now. The ceremony began at sunset, as was Serati tradition. The colonists, human, Serati, and the handful of other species who had found refuge on Kepler 4 to be formed concentric circles. Around the couple, Elder Thekara, the eldest surviving Serati, spoke the ancient words in their lilting language, while Chief Administrator Barnes offered the human legal commitments. But the moment that mattered most came when Vexara began to sing. Her voice was not what it had been. The chemical damage had changed its timbre forever. But what emerged was something entirely new, a song that spoke of loss and finding, of breaking and healing, of love that transformed rather than simply accepted. As she sang, the hybrid flowers throughout the plaza began to pulse with brighter light, responding to her call. Kai joined his voice to hers, his deeper tones harmonizing with her alien melody. He couldn't sing plants into bloom, but he could sing of devotion, of choosing each day to tend something beautiful with patient hands. When the last notes faded, the entire plaza glowed with bioluminescent flowers, and there wasn't a dry eye among the witnesses. By the authority of the colonial administration and the blessing of the Serati elders, Administrator Barnes declared, I pronounce you bonded in all ways recognized by this community. The celebration lasted deep into the night, but eventually, Vexara and Kai slipped away to their shared quarters. The space had been modified to accommodate her wings, and filled with their growing collection of hybrid plants, a living testament to what could be created when different worlds came together. Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a claiming and a giving that spoke of permanence in a universe that had taught them both how fragile love could be. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath sheets that shimmered with pollen from their bedside flowers, Kai traced the line of her collarbone with reverent fingers. I have something to tell you, Vexara said softly. What is it? She took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. The medical scanners confirmed it this morning. We're going to have a child. Kai went very still. Is that possible? Human and Serati genetics are more compatible than anyone suspected. Dr. Voss thinks the exposure to our hybrid plant compounds may have acted as a genetic bridge. Vexara smiled at his stunned expression. She's quite excited about the scientific implications. And you? How do you feel? Terrified? Amazed? Complete? She pulled his face down to hers. How do you feel? Like the luckiest man in the galaxy, he whispered against her lips. 1 year later, the former research station Echo had become New Serati, a thriving colony world that served as a sanctuary for refugees from a dozen different conflicts. The gardens Vexara and Kai had planted had spread across continents, healing soil that had been poisoned for generations. In the children's garden, Vexara sat with a group of young Serati refugees, teaching them to coax music from seedlings. Her own daughter, barely walking but already showing signs of inherited gifts, tottered between the growing beds with chubby hands outstretched toward every flower. But I can't make them grow, complained one of the children, a girl whose wing buds were scarred from the same chemical weapons that had ravaged Vexara's world. That's because you're trying to make them do what you want, Vexara explained patiently. Instead, listen to what they need, then offer it freely, without expectation. She demonstrated, her scarred hands cupping a wilted sapling. Instead of the pure, soaring notes her voice had once carried, she hummed a lower, richer melody, a song that spoke of surviving dark seasons and finding unexpected strength in broken places. The sapling straightened, unfurling new leaves that caught the afternoon light. You see, the most beautiful songs come from voices that have known sorrow and chosen joy anyway. As the children practiced their tentative melodies, Kai appeared. At the garden's edge, their daughter riding on his shoulders. The little girl's wings, tiny perfect things that showed no sign of chemical damage, fluttered with excitement as she spotted her mother. "Mama, sing," she demanded in the mixed language that was becoming common among the colony's children. Vexara rose, accepting her daughter into her arms, and began the lullaby she'd composed for her, a song that told the story of two broken people who had grown something beautiful together, of a dead world that had learned to bloom again, of love that transformed scars into maps of survival. Around them, impossible flowers swayed in harmony, their hybrid genetics a living testament to the power of different worlds joining together. And in the distance, ships from across the galaxy continued to arrive, carrying refugees who had heard whispers of a place where the broken could be made whole. Vexara had thought she was unlovable, had believed her scars marked her as irreparably damaged, but standing in her garden with her husband and child, surrounded by miracles they had cultivated together, she understood the truth that had taken her so long to accept. She had never been broken. She had only been growing toward the light.